We have been working with David after God's heart, the man, the person who's been described as one after God's heart. In the book of Acts, it tells us about David. I have found David, the son of Jesse, God says, a man after my heart who will do all my will. Today we're going to look at 3 chapters in 1 Samuel, 21, 22, and 23. And this is just a glimpse of what is going on in these 3 chapters. All those red circles are actually the places where David had to flee from his stalker, Saul. So he was now in the wilderness. He was from cave to cave. He was from hole to hole, from stronghold to stronghold, because he was being pursued relentlessly by King Saul. So from Ramah, where he was with Samuel, he goes to Nob. Can you see those words? From up Ramah to Nob to Gath to Adullam, and then he goes to Moab on the other side of the Dead Sea, comes back to Maon, to Ziph, to the forest of Horesh and Hereth, and finally, in the end of chapter 23, he's going to take time in En-Gedi, which is just at the western coast of the Dead Sea, En-Gedi. And that is a very, very picturesque place, because that is where he's going to meet Saul inside a cave. But that is for next week. So David is in running. He's fleeing the most powerful person on earth, the one who can destroy him by the mere sight of him. And that is why here in chapter 23, this is the summary of these 3 chapters. Saul hunted him day after day, but the Lord didn't let him find him. Isn't that amazing? We can be stalked day after day after day, and yet because the Lord is with us, we cannot be found. Look at this madman of a Saul that is trying to run after David. Discover his hiding places, Saul said. I'll find him if I have to search every inch of the entire land. And so you know what I call this episode in David's life? An unfun run. No fun at all. But here's a question for you and me this morning. What do you do when life, the Christian life, is not fun anymore? How do you live through unyielding stress, through relentless hostility? What if your daily activity in the office and even in your own homes have a high anxiety vibe? You know what I mean? A high anxiety vibe environment. What do you do? You see, the natural and immediate reaction to what I call a ham, a high anxiety moment. Remember that, high anxiety moment, because I won't say those words over and over again. I'll just say ham, and you know what I mean, right? A high anxiety moment. The natural and immediate reaction to a ham is to either fight it or to flee from it. Those are the 2 most natural things to do. And so like a bird woken up in its nest, we'd rather fly away when we get disturbed. Like a snake disturbed from its comfort, we'd rather bite, isn't it? And so what can we learn from a person after God's heart when he is subjected to ham, a high anxiety moment? Some of you are here and you are already anxious. You came into our gates and suddenly you felt tense. Or perhaps from here you're very relaxed, but after the service, you'll tense up again when you get home. Or when you go to work tomorrow, you're going to tense up once again. It's a high anxiety moment. What do you do as Christ's followers when those occasions come to us and seemingly they won't go away? Let's learn from David from these 3 chapters. You see, there are high anxiety instincts. There's the natural thing to do when we are anxious, and especially at a high level of anxiety. There are some things we just do without thinking. It's natural. You see, when David realized his death was now state policy, you see, not only is a madman after him trying to kill him, he knows that throughout Israel, everybody knows he is wanted dead not alive. He's wanted dead by the state. He would do what anybody would, react, and react very fast. And so he went to Nob. From Ramah, he went to Nob for sanctuary with the priest Ahimelech. That's the name of the priest. Now that's a scary moment for anybody David approaches. If he is wanted by the state, then he comes to you, how would you feel? Ahimelech felt that way. He trembled when he saw David because this guy is wanted, even though Ahimelech, the priest, knows he's a good guy. He's wanted by the authorities. And so he asks, why are you alone and no one with you? He knows he's a good and godly man. But you see, Ahimelech the priest doesn't want the sanctuary to be a massacre scene. That could easily happen. You could imagine David's exhausted, physically, more so emotionally. He's now a fugitive in survival mode. That's high anxiety. The priest expects him to have loyal warriors with him. He doesn't. He doesn't have anyone with him. He's alone. So his blood pressure rises, his pulse rate rises at an all-time high this time. It's high anxiety time. He's saying to himself, my stalker would soon be here. Where do I find food for today, for tomorrow, and the next day? How do I protect myself from Saul's henchmen? And so you'll find in the story, David speaking now to Ahimelech, the king has sent me on a private matter. Really? David lied, it says. He told me not to tell anybody why I'm here, and yet here he is telling him. I have told my men to meet me later, but there are no men. Now what is there to eat? Right? What is there to eat? And remember, I have men. Give me more than for myself. Give me some 5 loaves of bread or anything else you can. Then he says this. The king's business, King Saul, his business required such haste. I left in such a rush that I came away and I forgot my weapon. He got away with it. He got what he needed. He got provisions. He got a weapon. How? By lying. Practicing duplicity. That's what happens naturally in high anxiety moments. Now, should that be the way to go? Definitely not. You see, something happens when we're in a state of high anxiety. Something snaps when we're not careful. And let me put it this way. Our operational behaviors, the way we behave, the way we conduct ourselves, this thing that makes me act certain things, these behaviors don't align with what we truly believe in. We say we believe one thing, but when it's high anxiety time, I forget what I believe in and I simply act the way that is natural and easy for me. You get my point? You see, native and sinful self-protective instincts kick in during high anxiety moments. And so a little white lie here, a little white lie there, just to make it through this hump. David was no different. A little kid quoted Proverbs 12:22. You know Proverbs 12:22? A lie is an abomination to the Lord. But a little kid put it this way. A lie is an abomination to the Lord, but a very present help in time of trouble. Isn't it? Practicing duplicity. Well, the next day, you see what happens? He was pretending insanity. David flees to the perfect hiding place. And what is that? What is the perfect hiding place for somebody like Saul? You go where Saul's enemies are. In Gath. And you know what Gath is? Gath is the hometown of Goliath. A Philistine city. Can you imagine? He just killed the Goliath from Gath. And now here he is pretending to be somebody else. So I'm thinking he came in there incognito. Right? Into the gates of Gath. Because he's pretty sure Saul will not go near Gath. Therefore, he is safe. Right? Wow, he is quite a strategic manager. But here goes. What happens? This is the time I say it's called sleeping with the enemy. Saul wouldn't dare come close to this place, David thought. So he enters Gath incognito. But somebody shouted as soon as he entered. And the shout goes like this: "Can this be David? The famous David? Is this the one they sing of at their dances? Saul kills by the 1,000, David by the 10,000. When David realized that he had been recognized, he panicked, fearing the worst from Achish, king of Gath. So what happens in panic situation? High anxiety, aham. So right there, while they were looking at him, he pretended to go crazy, pounding his head on the city gate, foaming at the mouth, spit dripping from his beard. You want me to do that before you? You'll all flee, I'm pretty sure. But this is disguise upon disguise. He tried to get in incognito, disguised. He found out, and then once found out, he disguised his sanity so that people think this is insane. So what happens? He disguised his identity so he wouldn't be found, and then he disguised his sanity so he wouldn't be bound. That's a poem, by the way. Achish says, the king of Gath, in my own words, "Get this hell of a man the hell out of here." That's what he said, basically. Guess what? David got away with it again. He got away with it. Really? Yes, he did. But at the expense of his own integrity. What really matters in this life? Is integrity something we just throw around and say, that's a nice thing? But during ham moments, do you throw it out? Because what's more important is my skin, the outer shell, but not the integrity that is the inner man inside of me. Throw that away. Who cares about that? In Tagalog, Daniel, you can easily figure this out. Ang taong nagigipit kahit sa patalim kakapit. Got it? Great. Now translate it. Arturo, this is the translation. When you're living at the edge, you grab even a razor-sharp knife's edge. When you're living at the edge. Isn't that so true? We let our guard down in high anxiety vibe. It's natural. It's easy to throw away biblical convictions, behave unbecomingly. Now I know, by experience, I have two instincts during ham. What's ham? Great. Here are my two instincts. I will explode in anger. I let my emotions out, explode in anger. That's fight. Or secondly, I'll exit in avoidance. Right? Explode in anger, exit in avoidance. You know, one night, just the three of us at home, my wife and my daughter, I exploded. And I said, my goodness, I just exploded a few weeks ago. But last night when I was looking at the sermon this morning, I looked at that and I said, Carissa, my daughter, I said, have I apologized to you for that explosion? He said, what? Remember, a few days ago, I just simply got so mad. Oh yeah, I'm really sorry about that. And she said, it's okay. It's okay. You know, I could have said she's okay with that. I didn't need to mention it to her. We're okay. But it's important to always come back and actually say it. Because by doing so, we learn our lesson. Because if we don't say it, it's just that we're going to repeat it again. It's going to be okay. It's not okay, and it's never okay. These are my strategies. Both are most natural, and yet they are the most immature way of handling conflict. Do I get away with it? Oh, yes, I do sometimes. But you know what? If I, at the expense of my own integrity, do not approach it the right way, I get into deeper trouble, and there's a payback time tomorrow. There will be a payback time if you don't handle it correctly. Sir Walter Scott in 1808, can you imagine? The turn of the 19th century, 1808, Sir Walter Scott put it this way. You might know this. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. How many lies have we made? And do you think it's just small? Maybe you can get away with it today, but it's going to be so much of a mess later on, it's going to haunt you sometime in the future. Is that the right way? No, it's not. It's not biblical, although it's in the Bible. It's not being taught in the Bible. It's being taught as a negative example so that we learn from it. So what do we learn? You see, when you are in the midst of a ham and feel the urge to snap and react quickly, the best and only godly way through it is to press the pause button. Don't react. Press the pause button. Pause, 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 and then do the following instructions. We learn it in this story. Here are some instructions during ham. First, when you press the pause button, look into your heart's condition. That is to say, you and I need to be much more self-aware of what's going on inside of us. You know, when we came to Christ and we read that verse in 2 Corinthians 5, it says, those who are in Christ are new creatures. Oh, wow, I am a new creature. And we are. But it just doesn't remove the old baggage. It's still there. And therefore, transformation doesn't happen overnight. There are a lot of things in us that we need to work on. And somehow, in our position of being new creatures, we can become victorious. You see, David's miscue is that he reacted, not responded. He was quick to the gun. He didn't press the pause button at this point. But you see, only in retrospect did he reflect on his inner world. By retrospect. You know, he wrote about the occasion in Psalm 34. And so if you have read, and I know a lot of those verses are going to be familiar to you in Psalm 34, he wrote about the episode, and he actually said and confessed in the episode, you know what? I had my anxious fears. I was desperate. My heart was broken. I was kicked in the gut. Now, all these things were happening inside of him at that ham, and we need to recognize those things and ask a deeper question. Why? Why do I feel threatened? Why am I so angry? Because there's something behind it that's much deeper than you think. Why am I so passive? Why am I so threatened? Why do I hate that person or this person? Why? Just keep asking, why do I feel this way? It's not, by the way, some kind of psychological analysis of what's going on inside. No. We must face the reality of our hearts before God. That's it. Be honest to God with what's going on inside of us. You see, I wasn't afraid of Goliath, David might have said. I had no fear of lions. I had no fear of bears. Why am I so afraid of Saul? Isn't it? Isn't that a fair question? Why? Why suddenly am I afraid of this guy? Now this is just me speculating. Maybe he reminds me of Dad Jesse. He made stupid remarks while I was growing up. David, you're the youngest. You're the least. You belong to the dirt and the bad smell of the sheep. You know what I'm saying? This reminds me of Dad, and I get mad. But sometimes it's so deep and so unconscious, and yet you replay it in your life over and over again because you have not resolved it in your life. Or maybe it's my older bully brothers who thought nothing of me, excluded me in the family table. Whatever it is, the high anxiety moments trigger something of the past, and all our unrestrained and untamed reactions break through. Sometimes you feel like, why did I do that? Right? You surprise yourself sometimes. Why did I do that? I thought I wasn't capable of that, and suddenly I am. I am capable of that. Why am I so angry all the time? Why do I get so jealous? Why am I so possessive? Why am I so untrusting of people? Why the deep-seated anxiety? Why don't I change? You see, we need time for self-excavation. Even secularists today know its benefits. The Arbinger Institute, for one, wrote these words. It says this. These are secular marketplace business people. He says this. Self-deception blinds us to the true causes of problems. And once we're blind, all the solutions we can think of will actually make matters worse. Whether at work or at home, self-deception obscures the truth about ourselves, corrupts our view of others and our circumstances, inhibits our ability to make wise and helpful decisions. So to the extent that we are self-deceived, listen to this one, to the extent that we are self-deceived, our happiness and our leadership are compromised at every turn. Your happiness, your leadership, when you're self-deceived, compromised at every turn. And so here's the challenge, brothers and sisters. We must gain an awareness of our hearts marked by self-understanding. How has the past shaped you today? Significant successes. What are the tragic failures of yesterday? You see, they have created and embedded themes and patterns in your life. And if not resolved, whether you're a Christian or not, it's going to be replayed over and over again in the present. Will it be destructive or will it be edifying? You see, apart from that awareness, we're removed from the deep work of sanctification. We cannot be holy unless we face the truth about what's going on inside of us and say, Lord, I surrender this area of my life to you. Because sometimes it's easy to say, Lord, I surrender all of me to you. But never mind those things that I don't know about. You know it all. You're not going to be holy that way. Only as we encounter face to face those details in our hearts that are left unresolved, before God, we surrender it. That's the only time sanctification, holiness happens to you. First, look into your heart's condition. Here's the second. Learn life inside the cave. What do I mean by that? You see, David departed from there, escaped to the cave of Adullam, chapter 22, verse 1. David stayed in the wilderness in the strongholds, it says. David went up from there and stayed in the strongholds of En-Gedi. So cave after cave after cave, hiding. After the insanity of Nob and Gath, David flees to caves, strongholds. You see, that's the pause button he should have slammed earlier on, but he didn't. Aloneness in the cave, solitude, aloneness also makes us God-aware. More important than anything else, yes, we must be self-aware, but more important than anything else, we must be God-aware. And that happens only inside the cave. Why? Because the scaffoldings of our lives that prop us up, where we depend on, are removed. There are no longer scaffoldings. The crutches are taken away. And therefore, we can't depend on anything else but God. Because there's nothing else. That's the cave experience. And we need to learn to live our lives inside the cave. That's the only way we will grow in holiness. It's the only way He's going to supply us with power in order to live this life victoriously before Him. You see, inside the cave, we learn God is all we have. And when we encounter Him that way, that you are the only one I have, nothing I can depend on, you know what happens? We realize not only is God the only one we have, God is the only one we need. You see, that's the transformation of it all. You begin to realize, I have nothing, it's only God. And then in that encounter, you realize, oh, wait a minute, He's the only one I need. Nothing more. He is enough. Why do we know that? If you look again in Psalm 34, look at David's insight. In the cave, he says this, taste and see that the Lord is good. Right? Remember that one? Verse 8. How blessed is the man who takes refuge in Him. You see, he wouldn't have tasted and seen that the Lord is really good unless he's drawn to the cave. Fear the Lord, you His saints. For to those who fear Him, look at this, there is no want. They who seek the Lord shall not be in want of any good thing. So he realized, Jesus or God is all I have. And then later on he realized, oh my goodness, He's really all that I need. He satisfies me with everything, and everything else falls short. He supplies all things for me. And so in the cave of solitude, we learn two deep lessons. One, a realization, God is all we need. That's a realization. Secondly, a resolution. I will make amends. God is all I need. I will make amends. I learned that inside the cave. Look at verses 12 and 13, Psalm 34. David asked the question, who's the man who desires life, that he may see good? You know what it says here? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Where did he learn that? He's just been through it. In Nob lying, in Gath pretending, and in the cave he encountered God for who He is, and he says, who among you desires life? You know what? All these strategies to cope for your ham moment, get rid of that, because God is all you need. He is enough. He'll take care of you. How blessed is the man or woman who takes refuge in Him. How did you learn that? By reflection. Alone. Being self-aware, God-aware in the cave. And so the question is, how's your cave? Do you even have a cave? Have you learned life in the cave? Because apart from that cave, we will always cave in. We will. Henry Nouwen, Way of the Heart, says this: solitude, aloneness, cave, that's the furnace of transformation. The place of the great struggle and the great encounter, the struggle against the illusions of the false self, and the encounter with the loving God who offers Himself so freely to you and to me. Learn life in a cave. Third, high anxiety instructions. Lean on your faith community. Self-aware, God-aware, friend-aware. You know, one of God's gifts in high anxiety moments is spiritual friends. You see, while the priest didn't realize, he got duped by David, right? He provided David an emergency kit for life in high anxiety. Did you know that? In chapter 22, it actually tells us, verse 9 and 10, Doeg, remember Doeg? He was actually there in the sanctuary, maybe doing some purification rite, and Doeg is Saul's hitman. He says chief shepherd. What it means is he's Saul's assassin. And he was there when David was there, and David saw him. That's why he asked for a weapon. You remember? I don't have any weapon. He saw Doeg. And you see, Doeg reported to Saul. He saw David with Ahimelech. And Doeg says to Saul, do you know what Ahimelech the priest did? He did three things. He inquired of the Lord for David. He prayed for David. See, that's encouragement. He gave him provisions. You see, that's nourishment. And not only that, he gave him a weapon. That's armament. You see, spiritual friends do this. They encourage us, encouragement. They nourish us in the Word, and they arm us for battle tomorrow. Those are spiritual friends. Well, right here, and I was wrong the last time, Jonathan emerges again. I thought that was the last meeting. But Jonathan is still around. He arose, went to David, and it says in chapter 23, verses 16 and 17, Jonathan encouraged David in God. Thus he said to him, don't be afraid, because the hand of Saul my father shall not find you, and you will be king over Israel, and I will be next to you. That's a good thing, isn't it? High anxiety moment. You're encouraged by your friend. You're nourished by your friend. You're armed by your friend. And your friend stands with you. The greatest encouragement in high anxiety is to be reminded of our identity and destiny in Christ. David, you will be the king of Israel. Not my father. You will be king, and I am here to help you in that journey, because that is your identity, that is your destiny. Mindful presence of spiritual friends. You know, David reflected on that episode that he saw Doeg at that sanctuary. It's in Psalm 52. He wrote a psalm to Doeg. And again, as I said, Doeg was there probably for some purification ritual. We are not told. He was detained, it says. He happened to be Saul's hitman. Reported to Saul what the priest had done. And you know what happened? When Saul heard about that Ahimelech the priest was supporting David, he told his soldiers, kill all the priests. That's fratricide of priests. Annihilate all of them. But no one of his soldiers actually wanted to do that. He said, no, not me. I'm not going to do that. But Doeg said, I'm going to do it by myself. And he murdered 85 priests except one who escaped. And his name is Abiathar, who is the son of Ahimelech. He escaped the sanctuary. He is the only one who escaped. And he goes to David and reports what had happened. Psalm 52, a reference to Doeg. David actually says in verse 1, why do you brag of evil, big man? He's actually talking to Doeg. Big man, why do you brag of evil? But listen in on David's takeaway from that high anxiety vibe. Look at verse 9 of Psalm 52. Now, offering to God a prayer, David says, I thank you always that you went into action, and I'll stay right here, your good name, I hope, in company with your faithful friends. In company with your faithful friends. Lean on your faith community. And finally, lead on through conflict. In other words, not only self-aware, God-aware, friend-aware, but kingdom-aware. You see, somebody said conflict is really the context of ministry. If you think there is no conflict in this church, you're wrong. We're not doing ministry if there's no conflict. There will always be conflict in our lives. That's just normal. And so we need to learn to do something about conflict because it is part and parcel of our lives. Do we fight? Do we flight? What's the best approach? We need to lead on through conflict, not around it, but through conflict. They don't go away by avoidance or by silence. In God's economy, we see them as a sanctification shaper. Do you get my point? Conflict is one of God's most powerful engines to sanctify you and to sanctify me. Conflict. And therefore, we need to look at it with different eyes, right? Because God has a purpose and He wants to shape me through it. And so I can't just avoid it, but actually look at it as a gift. Pastor, you must be crazy. Well, whatever it is, insane or what, conflict is a gift. Now, don't go out there and just create conflict just because you think it's a gift. That's not what I'm saying, all right? All right. So we accept them, learn from them, overcome them in a godly way. And there's two ways we see here to overcome and lead. First, you acknowledge God's destiny for your sake and His kingdom's sake. What's God's agenda for me? What's God's agenda for your life? Do you think you merely exist in this life and hopefully when you die you just get to heaven? Is that it? Not at all. Not at all. God's agenda for your life is to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. You get saved in the process, but you don't stop just because you're saved. You are a disciple of Jesus Christ for life, and He has a plan and purpose for you to use you in ways you cannot imagine in this life. You proceed because you are a follower. How do we overcome and lead? Acknowledge God's destiny for your sake and His kingdom's sake. You see, chapter 22, verse 2 goes like this. Everyone, while David was in the cave, remember in Adullam, everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, everyone who was discontented, gathered to him, and he became the captain over them. Now, there were about how many? 400 men with him. Now, if I were in David's shoes, I'd be like Achish, the king of Gath. Get the hell all of these people out of here, right? Can you imagine 3D men, a 3D band, in distress, in debt, discontented? Can you imagine to have a band of people like that to lead? And yet he became the captain over them. He probably said, now I can sing a new song, The Band on the Run. Never mind, the young people can't understand what I'm talking about. He probably could have said, no, I want the best and the brightest, but he didn't. He took responsibility to lead. Second, overcome and lead. You take responsibility for your role in the problem. You see, when all the priests were annihilated and only one escaped, reported to David what had happened, David said, I have caused the death of all your father's family. Right? Stay here with me, and I'll protect you with my own life, and any harm to you will be over my dead body. Over my dead body. I'm not sure what happened to our slides over there, but what's happening here? You see the change in David's tone? I've caused the death of all your family. He takes the blame for it. He stands and says, stay here with me, I'll protect you. My own life. If any harm will come to you, it's going to be over my dead body. You see the change in tone, in language? Yesterday he was lying, he was deceiving, disguising, he was disgusting. But today he's a different man. He's no longer reacting, but responding. He takes charge over his life. He takes on the challenge. And that's what it is. You see, a person after God's own heart is kingdom aware. He or she might see conflict. And when you see that conflict, you say, wow, what a holiness shaper this is. But also a stepping stones to God's agenda for shaping him for the world. God's in the business of shaping you and me for a better world. So we would be more effective, more holy, more like Christ as we take on His agenda for the world. So stay calm, stay connected, take responsibility, and overcome. Let me end with a story. How do you put two big egos to work together? That's very difficult, isn't it? You cannot. Well, my story is like this. The one big ego was the head of the U.S. mission. The other big ego was the head of the international mission. We had different visions of the mission. We both wanted control and for the other to submit. After 2 years of conflict, praying, I decided it was time to change course. I wouldn't want to live like this for another 4 years, which I could have, but I said, no more, avoid. You know, I still have regrets over a botched, unresolved conflict. I wish I had learned to press the pause button earlier, but I failed, and I learned my lesson the hard way. The hard way. Ego, pride, so hard to break. And yet, Jesus is in the business of doing that. You know, Jesus had a pause button himself when he was in a high anxiety moment. You know what his cave was? It was the garden at Gethsemane. He was self-aware, he was God-aware, he was friend-aware, wanted disciples to be with him, and he was kingdom-aware. God, what do you want me to do? You remember? He won the battle at the Garden of Gethsemane. Calvary was simply the evidence of the victory at the garden. You remember after the Last Supper, deeply grieving to the point of death, Matthew says, distressed inside. He went to the garden, his cave, and 3 times he prayed, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup of suffering from me. Right? This conflict. Remove it from me, yet not my will, but thy will be done. Your agenda for the world. Luke tells us he was in agony and his sweat became like drops of blood. But he led through that conflict. And he died on the cross for you and for me. You see, Jesus wants you to know you can have this rest. This rest that will ultimately resolve all of your high anxiety moments. You see, apart from Jesus Christ, there is no chance. But with Jesus Christ, ultimately, if you're willing to follow him and not break integrity, to follow him, he'll resolve all your high anxiety moments. He went through the same and conquered it because of his obedience to the Father. He secured through his death your life, your salvation. That is, if you will turn over your life of independence from God to a life of surrender. Friends, it's not just saying, Lord, I surrender all. But Lord, look inside of me. See if there be any hurtful way, as the psalmist said. Search me and try me. And what you see in there, reveal to me that I may surrender all to you. You can't surrender what you don't know. But surrender to God what's inside of you. And he'll take it and change you. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word to us this morning. And I pray for that one who might be in here this morning, Lord, experiencing a high anxiety moment. Lord, I pray that these words might not be simply words to hear, but your word that will embed itself in hearts, searching, trying, testing, so that whatever is in me and in us might be revealed to us, and we surrender to you. Lord, help us through our high anxiety moments to understand you have a greater perspective. And in that perspective we will dwell, to be more self-aware, God-aware, friend-aware, kingdom-aware. Help us when we are in conflict, to lead properly. Perhaps to press that pause button every now and then. Recalibrate where we are and let the Spirit of God work in us, changing us even through the conflict. As always, Lord, we return to you all the glory. And we thank you for your relentless work in our lives. You never let us go. The promise is ours that what you begun in us, you will fulfill it until the day of Christ Jesus. And therefore, each one of us, are under construction. We submit to you in Jesus' name. Amen.